You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. One of the big questions we've gotten since last week with Harold Perkins' injury is, with that injury, how much does that affect Harold Perkins' draft stock? Could he potentially be a guy that elects to return after that injury? Brian Kelly on Monday was asked that question when he met with reporters, and about whether or not Perkins would. I think the way it was asked, I think it was maybe Brett Martell from the AP who asked the question. I think the way he phrased it was, could you say anything to maybe quell or dissuade the notion that Harold Perkins would still be going pro? Brian Kelly should have interrupted the question. Here's what he said.
I don't think any of those decisions are made. Way too soon for him to, or his family, to have made any kind of declaration whether this is his last game or not. I think they're just trying to get a hold of the surgery and the rehab associated with it. He'll take all that into consideration, and then when it's time to make a decision, he'll make a decision. Certainly he has plenty of time before he has to make that decision.
Yeah, I wonder if it might change. Certainly it would have changed if this was later in the year. I mean, if Perkins went on to have an amazing year and then got injured late, he may still go. If he struggled throughout the year and was injured late, maybe it's something more along the lines of what we saw with Logan Diggs, who returned to school but entered the transfer portal. Same with John Emery. Because it's early, by the time you have to make that draft declaration, he will have had the surgery and have gone through tons of rehab, might even be running by that point. So that could favor Harold Perkins if he elects to leave. But for what it's worth, Mel Kiper grades Harold Perkins as an off-ball linebacker, by the way. So not an outside linebacker, not an edge guy, an off-the-ball guy, an inside backer. And he rates him as the 6th best off-ball linebacker in this draft class. So no doubt the injury played a role in that, but also the struggles Harold's had making that transition to playing off-ball linebacker. And I think that's really the question that whatever NFL team takes him is going to have to answer. Let me give you an NFL analogy, something that I think we could all agree is analogous because of what we've watched. The New Orleans Saints watched Zach Bond be a really good edge rusher at the University of Wisconsin. He had some pre-draft issues, which caused his stock to drop. The Saints ended up taking him in round 3, and he never found a home in New Orleans. He goes to Philly. He's had more tackles through 3 weeks in Philly than he did in any one season during his time in New Orleans. What they're doing defensively fits him. And I think that's what's going to happen with Harold. It's going to have to be a team, a defensive coordinator that understands how to use his specific skill set, which is rare. He has a rare skill set, and a guy that can rush off the edge, a guy that can rush up the middle, and a guy that can drop in coverage. So how do you use that guy? It's going to take the right team to figure that out. So Perkins, Kiper has as the 6th best off-ball linebacker in his updated big board. There was a guy who at one point was on the big board of the top 25 overall prospects. Remember, the big board is not a mock draft. It's a ranking of the top prospects in the draft. Only one LSU Tiger on the big board. Not surprisingly, it is Will Campbell, who Kiper has as the 17th best prospect in this year's draft. For what it's worth, before the season started, Kiper had Will Campbell 22nd, so has him having risen 5 spots on his big board. He writes, Campbell started for LSU since 2022, has given up just 1 sack since that first season. He has a big frame, solid footwork, technique, make him an effective pass protector at left tackle. So the 17th overall player on the big board, he has Campbell as the 2nd best left tackle, or 2nd best offensive tackle. For what it's worth, he's got Emory Jones as the 5th best offensive tackle. So both of those LSU players pretty highly there at offensive tackle. The other players on the big board for Kiper, there's 3 others. The one that I think is the most intriguing is Garrett Nussmeier. This is going to be so imperative for what happens to LSU in 2025 is what Nussmeier does. And in this version of the big board, Kiper has Garrett Nussmeier the 8th best quarterback in this draft. Now, I'll grant you I'm biased. That feels low. Shedeur Sanders, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, Drew Aller, Jackson Dart, then Garrett Nussmeier, followed by Miller Moss and Will Howard. For what it's worth, in this most recent draft, the spring 2024 draft, the 8th quarterback taken was Jordan Travis, who went 171st overall, round 5 to the Jets. If Garrett Nussmeier goes through this season, and the feedback he gets back from the draft is you're a day 3 guy, my guess is he comes back. He comes back and plays the 5th year and tries to do what Daniels did, what Burrow did, what Mettenberger did, which was go from a really good quarterback. And I mean, quite honestly, Nussmeier's having a better 4th year, better first year as a starter at LSU than any of the guys I just mentioned. What Nuss has done through the first month is better than what Daniels did in 22, what Burrow did in 18, what Mettenberger did in 2012. So he may even have a higher ceiling, as crazy as that sounds, given how he's done so far this year. But it's worth filing that away. The biggest surprise to me was where he slotted Mason Taylor among the tight ends.
Mason Taylor!
Mel Kiper has Mason Taylor the 5th best tight end in this draft.
Mason Taylor!
Colson Loveland from Michigan, Tyler Warren, Luke Lackey from Iowa, Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, and then Taylor from LSU, followed by Caden Prieskorn from Ole Miss at 6. Oscar Delp, by the way, at 9, and I told you earlier this week, in the preseason, the coaches had Prieskorn as first-team All-SEC, Delp second-team preseason All-SEC, then it was Taylor third. So he's clearly risen, and I think he's going to continue climbing that board. He's going to set all kinds of receiving records for tight ends this year. And when you look at his physicality and his pedigree, I think he ends up climbing even higher than that. But just a starting point, I suppose. And then the other player who makes his debut is Braden Swinson. Kiper has Braden Swinson among the outside linebackers, and he has him as the 8th best outside linebacker. I think it'll be fascinating to watch as this season goes along if Swinson continues. Look, I don't think he's going to continue at this pace. I mean, he's pacing for 21 sacks. I don't think that's where he's going to land. But if you end up in a double-digit sack season, maybe setting the LSU single-season sack record, which is certainly in sight, he's 5 away from tying it. That's something that very much could be in play. So it's seeing Swinson move up into a day 2, potentially a first-rounder, as much as edge rushers are valued. So something worth keeping an eye on. It's just a starting point here, the first big board from Mel Kiper during this season. But there are 6 LSU Tigers among the top 10 at their position group. Will Campbell's the only on the big board among the top 25 overall. He's got him at 17, which I think is probably low as well, considering where and how offensive tackles are valued to probably continue to rise. But Nussmeier, Taylor, Campbell, Jones, Perkins, Swinson, all among the top 10 at their position, according to Mel Kiper. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.